All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So Happy New Year, everyone. I'm Kim Davis. I'm a member of the board at FEI. I just want to welcome everyone to this afternoon's event. Wishing you all a Happy New Year. Welcome to our first event of 2021. We're looking forward to another great year of events, and hopefully we'll be back in person together later on this year. I do want to remind everyone that this webcast does have CPE credits available, so please respond to the polling questions as they come up. And before I introduce our speaker this afternoon, I do want to hand it off to John Evans. He's going to tell you guys a little bit about our February event coming up that we're all really excited about. So John, if you're there, if you want to tell everyone about the positive psychology event.
I'll let you know.
John, are you on? Oh, there you go.
Kim, is it my turn?
Yep, it sure is. Good timing.
I'm sorry. Hey, yeah, happy. What day is it? Is it Thursday, Wednesday, whatever? But no, I'm happy to be back on an FEI call. We're going to be hosting an event in February that's going to be all based around positive psychology and wellness in the workplace. And I'm really excited about it. Corinne Neese, who is the expert in the field of positive psychology, and she's someone who brings a really great attitude around inspiring people and getting them around wellness and mindfulness and even just different concepts. We're going to make this an interactive event. So it's one where we're going to have breakout rooms. People are going to brainstorm together, and they're going to all talk about best strategies of creating an environment of success for their employees and how to lead that and how to make it more successful. So the event will be positive psychology highlighted, and then breakout rooms and interactive participation on better concepts of managing the processes. That's on, what is that, Kim? That's February 12th, right?
Yep, that's right. Yep.
Yeah, February 12th, 8:30 to 10 o'clock. It is open to everyone. We're not going to hold back. It's just going to be any type of leader, CFO, COO, CEO, even staff, seniors, whatever. It's more about driving good conversation that will lead to better work environments. So I will email everyone in the group and make sure we have that lined up. That'll be the next event on February 12th.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
Sure thing.
I'm really excited about that. Hope you guys can all join us.
Should be fun.
Okay, so with that, I would like to introduce our speaker for this afternoon, Duane Carey. He's president of the Maryland Free Enterprise Foundation. It's an organization that is focused on political research and education. And what I find really interesting about it, is their focus on how the legislative environment is impacting business, positive or negatively in the state of Maryland. So I think wherever you stand politically, this is really good information to understand sort of how that environment is impacting the businesses that we're either running or owning here in the state of Maryland. So with that, I will hand it off to Dwayne.
Thank you, Kim. Hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. I have a day job that has me doing other things, running a digital marketing company, but this is very much a passion of mine. I've been involved with this organization for a long time. I've been the president for, I think, 8 years, maybe 7. And I really believe that the more you sink your head into some of the facts, it's hard not to be passionate about some of this stuff, because there are available roadmaps for us for how to run the state better from an economic standpoint. And we basically have 49 other states that are these little cauldrons of science that we can look at what's happening economically, what's good, what's bad, and that's how you can really inform policy changes very well. So we're going to walk through a lot of that today, and we've got a bunch of polling questions built into this. And again, for your continuing ed, you respond to those. But the other thing I'd like to offer is, in addition to at the end of this presentation, this discussion, we'll have some Q&A. But I would love it if you chime in at any time. Denise will be monitoring the chat, and if there's a burning question while we're talking about a subject, please jump in and let's make this a bit of a discussion. I think we've got 40 people or less signed up today, so we can make this work. And I look forward to talking about this. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, are you seeing me okay? Seeing the PowerPoint? All right, great. So as I said, we're really looking at an in-depth look at the business climate. And why does business climate matter? It matters because we want to keep employers in this state so we can have more employment for the citizens. That's a pretty simple prospect that we're going to really be focused on as we walk through some of this. So Maryland Free is a almost 37-year-old now organization. Started in 1983 to keep track of our legislators, essentially. So we do a lot of different things. We have a political action committee. We'll talk about that a little bit. But really the biggest thing we do is we keep score of how all 181 state legislators in Maryland vote when it comes to business issues and growing the economy. As Kim alluded to, we're very much nonpartisan. We're decidedly pro-business. We're unapologetically very pro-business. But our board consists of people from both sides of the aisle, independents, and really just people that are focused on the fiscal side of running a state without any regard to the social issues and the other things that get people so whipped up politically. We have a very nice who's who of who our members are. We have national companies like GEICO and AT&T, and some of the great regional businesses like M&T and Katz, Abosch, and Merritt Properties, and then a lot, as with most membership organizations, a lot of mom and pops and people who are interested. And honestly, when you look at who our members are, so many of them are people who want to be able to stay in Maryland as their exit strategy. And as most of you know, as financial people, it doesn't make sense to stay in Maryland, and we're going to talk about that. If you want to learn a little bit more about us, so and you'll see the link to our website as we get a little further, but and that's marylandfree.org. But we write a column in I-95 Business Magazine, every print issue, which is 6 times a year. And if you just take a look here at some of the titles of these articles, you can a little bit see what we're about. And I'll just let you peruse those on your own when you have time. So we're going to start with our first poll question right now, and I think Denise will be putting that up on the screen. Which factor is more determinant of a state's business climate? The corporate income tax rate or the personal income tax rate? Okay, so 2-to-1, people think it's the corporate income tax rate. The data actually don't support that. So we're going to talk about that in the next probably 10 slides. But one of the first things I want to do is bring your attention to 3 excellent books, all written by economists, and each of which demonstrates that the personal income tax rate is by far a bigger determinant. In fact, as an organization, we've gotten to the point where we don't even pay much attention to the corporate income tax rate anymore. because what really happens, think about it as an executive at Boeing, for example, that is leaving Washington State and the high tax and union burden and looking at South Carolina, for example. A big determinant of where that company is going to locate is the executives and the effect on their personal wealth, on their personal income. They're the people making the decisions. So these different books here and the economical analysis shows that personal income tax is actually much more important. That's shown further here, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but this is, there's a great nonprofit called the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC. They're a DC think tank full of economists, and they're really the ones that look at state versus state throughout the country. And each year put together a ranking based on all of these, I think it's 12 or 16 economic factors. And one of the things we've done here, and we're going to talk more about, is we've highlighted some of the factors that are the strongest drivers of where people locate their business and how economically diverse and economically strong a state is, with top marginal tax rate being one of the keys. Now, with that knowledge, what is Maryland's top marginal personal income tax rate? Okay, we've got a little bit of a spread. Most people think it's the highest one. Everybody knows it's not zero. I'm going to move along to the next question, and then we'll discuss both of these at the same time. So the next one, also about taxes. Does Maryland levy an estate tax, an inheritance tax, both, or neither? Okay, so the majority think it's both, but we've got a lot of the people that just think it's only the estate tax. I'm going to go ahead and talk about, as I said, both of those questions now. Here is, and we'll spend a few minutes on this slide. Here's an analysis of Maryland and our three largest competitors economically. And again, this is empirically, they're our largest competitors. This is what the data show. So let's not focus on the other rows right now. Let's just look first at the death tax and the personal income tax rate. You can see that our tax rate is by far the highest among those other three competitors, with, of course, Florida having a 0% tax rate along with Texas. But North Carolina only 5.25%, Virginia 5.75%, and of course this is the combination, which is how we get to our 8.95. This is the combination of the state tax as well as the piggyback tax of local jurisdictions. And then second is the death tax. So you'll see that North Carolina, Florida, and Virginia all have none, but we have the unique distinction. We're literally the only state in the nation that has both an estate tax and an inheritance tax. That's a wicked double whammy, and that's why people with money don't want to stay in Maryland if they can help it. And that's a big problem. It used to be that New Jersey also had both an estate tax and an inheritance tax, and they were smart enough to end that. So we are alone in that that great distinction. Let's talk about the top row there. You see that Florida has gained a lot of people. Now, with people come wealth. North Carolina has gained a lot of people, and Maryland has lost people. And I'm going to show you in a couple of slides a really interesting depiction of how losing those people equates to losing wealth. Money literally walks away from the state. Virginia, for all the years I've been looking at this, which I guess is about 7 or 8 years, I've been looking at this data. All of these numbers come from, as I mentioned earlier, ALEC and their Rich States, Poor States annual publication. Virginia has been gaining population for the last many years, but in the last 1 to 2 years, they've started changing a lot of their policies and making some pretty bad decisions economically that actually accrue to our benefit as Maryland, because they're less of a threat now, and we're a little bit more equal the more they become like Maryland in policy setting. But North Carolina is moving along even further. So we've lost people. The other two big determinants here of what makes a pro-business state, our state minimum wage hurts us badly. I'll tell you a quick anecdote. When the legislature 2 years ago was looking at raising our minimum wage, there's a 3-generation factory in Baltimore City that employs unskilled labor, essentially. So blue collar that really needs the work. We all know what it's like in Baltimore City and the economic situation. And the gentleman who owns this factory, they employ about 100 people. He sat down and they shared this with us. It's a PowerPoint slide that he prepared and sat down with his state senator and said, "Senator, here's where we are. Here's what we pay people. Here's how we run our business. If you raise the minimum wage as you plan to do, here are the things that are going to happen. Either we have to fire people, we have to cut hours, or we have to leave the state." This was 2 years ago. They just opened their new factory in Cincinnati about 2 months ago. So these things have very real consequences. And it seems that no matter how loudly we shout this from the rooftops, the politicians don't follow this. They don't understand that the very people they're trying to help, or at least purporting to help, they're losing their jobs. They're losing hours when you ratchet up minimum wage. And if you look at North Carolina and Virginia, the reason they're tied for first is they're linked to, they just use the federal minimum wage. So right now, we're talking around $12 an hour in Maryland versus $7.25 an hour in North Carolina and Virginia. Now, where do you think you're going to put your manufacturing business if you're going to be employing entry-level unskilled people? Now, the other thing about that anecdote is this gentleman also showed that people who started at minimum wage, he had people that had been there a while that were making $80,000 a year, never went to college, showed up for work every day, and were making 80 grand. And that's the opportunity we lose when we make these wholesale decisions. The final one is right to work, and it's I didn't plan to mention Boeing, but that's a really good example of a company that fled a forced unionism state to go to a right to work state where they would have a little more control over how they run the business. And it turns out that's a very big determinant of a state economy's strength. Maryland is not right to work. It is a forced unionism state, yet our three biggest competitors are right to work. Next poll question. How many states in the US are right to work? Okay, very good. So we're right on. The answer is C, 21 to 30. It is actually 28 states are now right to work. And let me show you the map. I'm going to just pause on this for a minute and let everybody just kind of soak this in and think about who these different states are and what their economies look like. You're going to see some patterns as we show other maps throughout this this discussion. You'll see some coincidence between states losing population and states that are gaining population. States that have a better business climate and a less good business climate. I guess I want to point out a couple things on this map. If you take a look at Kentucky, Kentucky was a forced unionism state for quite a while, and I bring this up because it's an interesting analog for Maryland, because they had political pressure to not become right to work, but they had some counties in the hinterland that desperately needed manufacturing jobs. They desperately needed to boost their economy. So they did a very unique thing in making right to work a county by county approach rather than a statewide approach. Now, since then, the whole state has become right to work. But imagine if we could do that in Maryland. So, okay, we have a huge union influence here because of all the government workers. So we're not going to unionize the wealthy counties. We're not going to unionize Howard and Montgomery and maybe Baltimore County, but we allow right to work to happen, for example, in Baltimore City or Western Maryland or parts of the Eastern Shore where the economies are in the tank. Imagine what that would do to boost the people who so desperately need jobs. That is exactly what they did in Michigan. So if you think about Michigan and unions for a minute, and remember that Detroit is really the hotbed of unionism with the auto business. Michigan's economy, and particularly Detroit, was in such a shambles for so many years that the state legislature voted to turn things around, and they became a right to work state. That was in the economics world, that was huge. That's a huge thunderbolt that happened. So we're continuing to add right to work states, and the problem for us is the more this number rises from 28 to 29 to 30, those are more competitors for us as Maryland, and we're falling further behind. This, I literally just finished an article this morning for I-95 Business Magazine on this very table right here. This puts it all together in one spot, from very different perspectives, these different publications and organizations and think tanks. We don't rank well nationally at all as a business growth state from an economic impact, economic outlook. So again, I listed at the very top rich states, poor states by ALEC because it's by far the most rigorous and robust economic analysis of all of these factors. But if you go down, and the other one I highlighted here is the chief executive, no criteria, no methodology, nothing scientific, simply a poll of CEOs around the country, and boom, they nailed it. 35th when you know, thousands of dollars of research to get the rich states, poor states data together has us at 37. So the CEOs were very much on point. And the biggest take home about that is they know this. This is not a secret. It may be a secret in some state houses around the country, but it is not a secret in any of the boardrooms. People know where the good states are to build and grow and relocate a business. The other one I highlighted here is the Tax Foundation, a very well respected, large, been around a long time organization. And for the overall tax climate for business, we're 44th out of 50. So not good at all.
Dwayne?
I left the, Denise, are you?
Yeah, we have a question.
Great.
Lynn wants to know, why does USA Today rank us so favorably?
What a perfect segue. I was just about to say, I thought seriously about removing this because their criteria were completely different from the criteria that are normally used to judge a business friendly state. Couple pieces of perspective on this. First of all, USA Today ranks as the best, most business-friendly state in the nation, Massachusetts, who is, you know, they call it Taxachusetts, very high tax burden and a very heavy regulatory burden. So business people certainly don't think of Massachusetts as a business-friendly business. Instead, what their criteria are, if I remember off the top of my head, one is year-over-year GDP growth, so that's not bad. But the other two are fairly irrelevant. One you could argue is relevant. That's the number of adults with bachelor's degrees. But remember, a lot of jobs and a lot of economic growth doesn't necessarily require a bachelor's degree. So that's not the most, there's some argument for it, but it's not the most important variable. But the third one completely makes no sense, and it's average adult wage. So that doesn't mean anything to business people. In fact, business people would rather have labor costs low, not labor costs high. So I left it in there. It's a complete outlier, but I think it's good to talk about the variables that go into these. All the other ones, and particularly rich states, poor states, in addition to those four main variables I talked about, there's also things like workers' compensation costs, the tort environment, and other like true business things that people think about.
Dwayne, we have one more.
Sure.
Are there certain counties in Maryland that are more business friendly than others?
I just love this crowd. It's like I fed them the notes. It's coming up in a couple of slides. We'll talk about it. So let's move on to the next poll question, probably my favorite question. So a one-way U-Haul rental from San Francisco to Houston costs $4,500. If you were to do it the other direction and go from Houston to San Francisco, how does that affect the cost? I just love this one from a economic standpoint of, you know, the most basic law of economics being supply and demand. So think about everything we've talked about so far, that people flee high tax, high regulation states in favor of low tax, low regulation states. So there are a lot more people leaving California than entering California, right? So the number, it's actually 4 times more expensive to go from San Francisco to Houston than it is to go from Houston to San Francisco, because there's only so many trucks, right? So think about the costs that that are incurred in a one-way haul, because you got to pay to get that truck back. There's 2 things happening on this slide. One is this answer to, you know, California to Texas, but then if you look up above that at the bullet, it's very bad news for Maryland, actually. And what it says is that Maryland is really seriously not much better than California on this front. People are fleeing Maryland for exactly the same reasons they're fleeing California. So U-Haul has this whole index for all 50 states, and looks at how many trucks are leaving the state and how many trucks are coming in. And there's only 4 states that are worse than us with regard to that influx. Similarly, United Van Lines, I'm going to show you some demographic data with this one as well. But take a look at some of these states here. So look, number 8, you know, supposedly the most business friendly is you know, losing people at a big rate. New Jersey, New York, Illinois, Connecticut, California, these are all very high tax, high regulation states. North Dakota, the only reason that's there is because of what has happened in the oil market. There was a huge boom, and people just poured into North Dakota with fracking and oil and gas, and that's dried up a lot lately. So that has dropped. But let's take a look in these next couple of slides at the actual data. So here with Maryland, when we look at the reasons that people are coming into the state or leaving, there actually are some people coming into Maryland to retire. I don't understand why. Maybe they're going to Ocean City. I don't know. But look at the huge disparity between those leaving and those coming in. That's the biggest chunk right there, the biggest difference. When we look at the ages, unfortunately, we're losing people at the highest earning time of their career, right? You could argue that, you know, it's 45 to 64, but the way they've broken this down, you can see a pretty stark difference that people at that age are leaving. And I guess the 65 or older number below that being about even doesn't really make sense with the other data, but who knows? But you can see it better here with regard to income. So I've highlighted 2 sections of this data because they're actually both a problem. So obviously at the bottom there, the fact that the biggest disparity between those coming in and those leaving is the wealthy. The wealthier people are leaving Maryland, that's a problem. But it's also a problem that, look at the disparity between inbound and outbound at the $50,000 to $75,000 level. So it's double. There's double the people coming in that are leaving. So we're building up our population at a lower income rate. And again, that's going to contribute to a net loss of wealth over the big picture. In a few slides, I'm going to get back to this thing about individual counties, but But let's go ahead and tackle this one right now because this is actually a pretty important part of our whole discussion. Can't get more even than that. 50-50. I would bet that if this were not a multiple choice question and it was right in the name of your delegate or senator, I bet the number would be a little bit lower and a little less accurate because you might think somebody's your delegate. It's very confusing. We have, so I'm in District 9, but it's 9B. And then there's 9A in Ellicott City. And do normal people know whether they're in 9A or 9B? Of course not. You know, people are busy living their lives, and it's very hard to understand that. So I want to bring your attention to a couple of tools. I mentioned earlier that what Maryland Free is all about is this accountability of the state legislators, and we do that accountability through roll call. That's our annual publication. It's been published since 1983, and that's what catalogs all of the votes by the different legislators, and I'll show you a little bit more of that. On the left side of the screen is a screenshot of our app called Vote Jobs Maryland. And on the app, as well as on our website, you can enter your address and you can determine exactly who your state legislators are. And you can look at how they vote. You can see that and again, this is only on business related stuff, economics. You can see how they have voted on each of these different issues and how they voted over the course of their tenure. You can also click through to see a little bit more about them, and most importantly, to contact them to discuss their votes and to discuss your priorities with them. So I encourage everybody to please write this down, and after this afternoon or this weekend, go to either the App Store for Apple or the Google Play Store and download this app. It's free. And it puts a lot of information in your hand so that next time you're at, post-COVID, when you're at an event and a politician has his hand out and his palm up, you can say, well, let's take a look at how you voted for jobs in the economy and business before I think about writing you a check or coming to your fundraiser. This is what the internals of roll call look like. So each year, and I know this looks very confusing, but it's honestly not once you kind of focus in on it for a second. Each year we take about 10 votes in the House and 10 votes in the Senate. And all bills that are clearly about business or economy, job creation, and we say whether those are good bills or bad bills for the economy. And then we just simply give a score. So if there's 10 bills and somebody scores the proper way on 8 of those 10, then they get an 80%. And then we also, you can see in the far right column, we do a cumulative, and this is really important because somebody might have a bad year or somebody might have a good year, but that cumulative really tells you how they have voted over the course of their tenure as a politician. Here's what we look at when we decide which bills to score, and the best way to view this is a job creator or a job destroyer. And kind of my mantra for the last couple of years is, if you make it harder to employ, you get less employment. I don't know how to say it more simply than that, so I keep saying it a lot. If you make it harder to employ, you get less employment. And so how do you define harder? Well, harder is, do you make it more expensive to employ? Are you adding a lot of workplace regulations that add to your regulatory burden and your bookkeeping burden? Are you adding liability, which we get more and more of all the time, liability so that it's easier for the employer to be sued? All of these things are real. They have a very real effect. And that's why, go to McDonald's now and you're entering your info into a kiosk. That kiosk is never late for work. It's never going to sue somebody, and it's not going to have a slip and fall accident where it's going to sue somebody. So price controls, choosing winners and losers, establishing bad precedent. This is a big one. Each year, there are bills that fly totally under the radar because they'll be about something like dog bites, literally. And, the business community is not going to pay attention to something about dog bites. But within that legislation, they're setting precedent to expand liability, to set up precedent for treble damages in the event of, so triple, in the event of a problem. So there's all these little things that us as a kind of a watchdog group, we're looking at that, and then we're publishing that, and that's some of the bills that we're putting into roll call, so we can let everybody know that, hey, this stuff is going on. And that's where our tort environment is a bit problematic. It's not as bad as minimum wage, right to work, and taxes, but it is a contributor. Okay, now this is where we're going to get into a little bit of the counties that are more advantageous for business. But let's start here. So I showed you a book by the same title, How Money Walks, when I showed those three kind of must reads, and really they're must reads for legislators at a minimum. If they would all read them, we would be in great shape. But there's also this fantastic website, howmoneywalks.com, and you can go there. It's very interactive. And let's just start here for a minute. The red states have lost wealth between 1992 and 2018, which is the data set. There's a new data set about to come out because we just finished the census. So as soon as that's in, he's going to update all of this data. This is an amazing resource here. The green states gained wealth. So first, does anyone notice a similarity between this and the right to work map? It's actually quite similar. The interesting thing here is if you look up to the Northwest and Oregon and Washington, those are not right to work states, but they are destinations for California. California is so messed up that it's very advantageous to leave California and go. So you're still on the West Coast, you still have all your distribution channels, but Oregon and Washington are much better from a business and economic forecast standpoint than California is. The other thing to point out about this is I've been in forums with legislators where they have point blank said, we do not have a problem. We are the place everybody wants to come to. And, the fact that people are going to these other states, it's just for the weather. The data in the Wealth of States, which is one of the books that I showed, The Wealth of States, Rich States, Poor States, and How Money Walks, the data clearly demonstrate that weather has nothing to do with it. And you can see that on this map. I guarantee you nobody's going to the beach in Idaho in June. So it's not about weather, it's about all these other policies. Now, I already gave you the hint that it's Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Texas that we lose the most wealth to, but which do you suppose is the biggest? The state to which we lose the most wealth? Okay, very good answers. It used to be that we lost most of our wealth to Virginia. And I would love to tell you that I intentionally made a trick question, but I didn't. I just screwed up. This was Florida was supposed to be on this because Florida is the biggest, and I wrote Texas instead. Florida by far at 8 billion a year is the biggest beneficiary of our policies. And then you can see, if you look here in this left corner, where we've lost wealth to, North Carolina is rapidly catching Virginia, and it's going to overtake Virginia any day. I bet you when this new census data comes out, that's where we'll be. And a quick anecdote, I sent out late last night, I sent out a link to this to my board of directors in case any of them wanted to join. And I got an email from our board chair, Scott Dorsey of Merritt Companies. So they're a really, really fantastic commercial real estate developer. And Scott's email back to me was, oh gosh, I wish I could come, but I'm in North Carolina looking for opportunities. I wish there were more in Maryland. And that's exactly what we're talking about today. That's exactly why Maryland Free exists and why Scott is willing to give his time and energy to be the board chair. Now, I love this slide because another great thing about this interactive website is you can see county by county data. So to orient everyone, if you're not super familiar with these counties, the top red one is Baltimore County with Baltimore City interspersed. And then the two on the bottom, you have Montgomery County to the left and Prince George's County to the right and a little bit lower. So above that, so directly to the left of Baltimore County, at the top, you have Carroll County. To the left of that, you have Frederick County. And then the white in the middle is Howard County, okay? So Howard is very much neutral. I live in Howard, my business is in Howard, and it's interesting because we're politically pretty neutral. The eastern part of the county is more progressive, the western part of the county is more conservative. What I find very interesting is if you plot the results of roll call, I'm speaking slowly so you can stay with me here. We take roll call, that's where we keep score, right? If you plot that in a map, here's what it looks like. Now this has held true for years. Look at where most of the red is. So the red is the low scores in roll call. So Baltimore County, Montgomery County, Prince George's County, part of Howard. Carroll and Frederick are green. Part of Howard is green. It perfectly conforms to the actual census data. This is US Census data about incomes leaving these counties. So you can actually click on, if you go to the site yourself, you can click on each county and you can see, just like we have here in this lower left, you can see which counties that particular county gained wealth from and which counties it lost wealth to. So it is really, really strong information that people can use to make decisions, and certainly legislators can use to set policy. Want to talk, and you can see in here too, I mentioned earlier about how some of these districts are split. So, 42B and 42A, they can tend to be quite different. So one quick slide on our pack, and actually the image goes with this doesn't even really have a lot to do with it other than I built this image to go on our brochure, but it's instructive to talk about. This shows the number of Fortune 500 companies and Fortune 1000 companies in each of these given states. And I just simply did simple math of how many Fortune 500 companies per capita so that it would be apples to apples, right? We're at a measly 0.66 with our 6 million residents. So 0.66 Fortune 500 companies per capita. Look at Texas. Look at Virginia. So Virginia is 4 times more likely than us to either retain or attract a Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 business. That's a big deal because they employ a lot of people. The other thing I want to just say briefly about our political action committee. So I mentioned roll call and how we keep score. And we talk about accountability, right? We talk about holding the legislators' feet to the fire for how they vote. Well, the way we do that is through our PAC. In the last election in 2018, we had $170,000 that we deployed, which put us in the top 3 or 4 PACs in the state. And the way we deploy that money, just as I said at the outset, that we're a nonpartisan organization with both sides of the aisle on our board, that's how we deploy the money as well. So if there's a given race where there is an incumbent that has historically been doing poorly in roll call, voting the wrong way, we'll get behind the challenger if we know something about their business background. Similarly, though, if it's in a jurisdiction, I just showed you all that red in Montgomery County and in Prince George's County and Baltimore City. If there's a situation where someone is going to be voting a little better from what we can tell from interviews, from discussions, from writings, if they're going to vote a little better, but they're still by no means pro-business to our criteria, well, that's okay. We just want improvement. We are not looking to change the political supermajority that's in Annapolis. We really don't care. We don't care who these politicians are, what party they're in. We just want them to vote for the economy. So our PAC is a great way to do that. And if anyone wants to, I'll make my quick sales pitch. If anyone wants to help contribute to that, we make a difference. We have moved the needle on several of these districts. Okay, so that's the background on where we stand as a state. This next couple of sections will go much quicker, and it's about the bills that were passed and are now enacted or that failed in the 2020 session, and then we'll talk a little bit about in concert with that the things that they're putting forth now, because the session started last week and a half ago. So as you know, it was a shortened session, and there are very real ramifications of that. One of the things we saw was that in their rush to get out, there were a lot of bills passed in the House. And this is important for you to know. Every year we see some pretty awful bills, frankly, passed in the House of Delegates. And then when they get moved over to the Senate sits on them and says, no, this is a pretty awful bill, and it doesn't go anywhere. Or it doesn't even get out of committee. Sometimes it doesn't even get a vote. Pardon me, doesn't even get a vote. What happened this year with this shortened session and everybody's hair on fire because of COVID, a lot of these bills that were passed in the House, they just kind of got a blank check from the Senate. So people that had very traditionally voted very pro-business were voting for things that they had no business voting on. And I can only guess they didn't even read them, and they just voted to get out of Dodge because everybody was worried about getting COVID. The theme of the session, however, is very important, and it's something we're still seeing today. And it's this idea, this modernize our tax code is kind of the mantra of Senate President Bill Ferguson. And unfortunately, that modernization involves increases in taxes and taxing lots of things that had not been taxed before, such as digital products and services. Big deal for everybody on this call, actually. The big issue of the year was the Kerwin bill, and that's a $36 to $40 billion investment, depending on how you do the math. And you're going to raise spending that much, you're going to raise taxes. And then just to give you the numbers, people don't generally know this. The set of numbers on the left, this is about the supermajority. So there's 141 members of the House of Delegates. 42 of them are Republicans. There are 47 senators in the Senate and 15 are Republicans. So it's a solid, 2.5 to 1 throughout the legislature. And what that gives you is veto-proof lawmaking. So the governor in 2019 vetoed 2 bills. I'm not going to spend any time on those right now. But what's really important, very important, are these 3 bills from 2020. They're all very heavily interrelated. HB 1300 is the Kerwin bill, and 732 and 932 are the bills put forth to help pay for them. They would not pay for Kerwin on their own, but they would be a start. Okay. There's a big problem with these bills. For one thing, and again, talking to financial executives, we can talk about economics, and let's talk about the idea of elasticity, and in this case, inelasticity of demand. So if there were ever 2 examples of an inelastic demand, it's certainly tobacco and digital advertising. Tobacco, because everybody who partakes in the product is addicted. So when you raise the tax, they're not going to stop partaking. They're going to continue to partake, and it's just going to cost them more. So tobacco, big tobacco, is going to pass 100% of that tax increase on to addicted Marylanders. In the case of Google, what this advertising tax is, it's a 10% gross receipts tax on all the big digital companies. So Google, Facebook, Amazon, they all have to pay this, but they don't have to pay it, because with Google, for example, they're the only game in town. If you are, Joe the plumber, and you want to spend $1,000 a month on advertising your business on Google with Google Ads, if and when this bill goes through and Google adds fees to this, your $1,000 a month is now $900 a month in value, but you're still paying $1,000. Think about the guy, Joe the plumber in Montgomery County, Maryland, competing with somebody in Loudoun County, Virginia, who doesn't have that tax. Think about that massive competitive disadvantage that we just put on that business owner. I'm not just, I'll get to that poll here in a second, but I want to move first beyond that to show you that this has happened in a couple of other places. The UK, Austria, and Turkey all have instituted these digital services tax that are gross receipts taxes. I mean, it's unbelievable. Who does a gross receipts tax? And in literally every one of these cases, the UK, Austria, and Turkey, Google 100% passed the taxes on to the advertisers. So this HB 732 and HB 932, they're taxes on business. They are not taxes on big tech and big tobacco, as their proponents have claimed. So let me give you, hold off on answering this, and let me just give you a little hint and a little bit of background on this one. Generally, because it's a supermajority, when Governor Hogan vetoes bills, in the first week, sometimes the first day of the next legislative session, they override his vetoes because they can. It's a complete party line vote, and boom, you're done. Whatever bill we passed last year is moving on. Interestingly, the legislature vetoed 16 bills of his last week, but they did not touch yet Kerwin or the 2 digital tax bills that go along with Kerwin. And why is that? They're not going to have a hearing on it till like February or something. And there's a big body of people out there that have put together this coalition. It's like Marylanders for Tax Fairness, I think it's called. And they're trying to tell this story that I just told you about who's going to actually pay this. And so are they going to go ahead and veto this now, or are they going to wait, or are they going to wait till next year? What are they going to do? So let's go ahead and do the poll, Denise. Okay, so the majority says yes, 2-to-1 margin. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. I think they will not. And I'll just add this one piece. So over, throughout the summer and even into the early fall, there was a lot of clamoring around doing a special session of the General Assembly. And I mean, it felt to me like a majority of the majority wanted to do that. They wanted to address evictions with people out of work and a lot of, everything COVID related. And my theory has been that the 2 leaders, Speaker Jones in the House and Senate President Ferguson, I think they didn't want to have a special session because they would have had to face this. And I don't think they want to face this because it's a massive tax increase. Who wants to do politically, who wants to do a massive tax increase in the midst of COVID? I almost said on the heels of COVID. We're still in the midst of COVID. You have 400,000 deaths, 100,000 of them happened in the last month. So it's going to take some real guts to raise taxes at a time like this. So we'll see. I'm going to quickly go through some of the bills that were passed last time, and we'll just talk about a few of them. You probably all know about this pass-through entities tax. The data center bill was pretty good. We were concerned about this balancing the state budget referendum that the voters approved of. And basically what this does is it takes away, and to be fair, many other states, in fact, I think the majority of other states have a similar setup, but we have a very constitutionally powerful governorship here in Maryland. And what this does is he sets the budget, he or she, whoever the next governor is, sets the budget, but then now the legislature can monkey with it. They can move things up and down and take things away from that governor's budget as long as they don't exceed that budget. And so that is out there now, and there's detail. There's a bill in about this now that it's been approved to pursue, and that's troublesome to a lot of us. This is probably one of the more important bills that we need to discuss. That was passed in the House last year, but didn't make it through the Senate. And we fully expect it to be, well, we don't expect it. The bills are out now. Most of the bills, they're still filing some bills, but there was a very strong theme. Remember, they had to somehow pay for Kerwin. So they went after a lot of these economic development tax credits, and there's a ton of them. And this bill in particular, but there were several others, really stripped those down. They shortened the time period of some of these. They changed criteria. And if you stop and think for a minute, I talked about Baltimore City and the western part of the state, places where people really desperately need jobs. That's where these tax programs, these tax incentives are deployed. So when we have some of the politicians talking about this is their effort to, quote, claw back corporate welfare from these businesses and things like that, it's no, we're trying to attract people to go set up shop in West Baltimore. And you got to have an incentive because the taxes are high, the crime is high. They're not going to just go there just for the hell of it. They're going to go there for incentives. So cutting back these incentives is very disconcerting. This bill, by the way, on the bottom is back, extending the family, the paid leave to include family bereavement. Just an FYI. In the interest of time, I'm just going to focus on some of these highlighted ones, so we have some time for discussion at the end. I want to point out the bottom one here, HB 1628. This was the holy grail. This was going to solve the Kerwin funding problem. Moving the sales tax from 6% down to 5%, but expanding it to literally everything. So expanding it to the services provided by every professional on this call and every other service, essentially, in the state. And thankfully, this one got everybody's attention. There was so much uproar that even the sponsor of this bill voted against his own bill in the committee, and they killed it 22-0 in committee. So I don't expect this to come back, but I guarantee you will see other services being taxed. Instead of a broad brush of taxing all services, it's just going to be, let's attack this industry, this one, and let's start making them pay taxes on services. This bottom one I want to talk about just briefly. For years, 5, 6, 7 years, the legislature has forced employers to be ignorant about the criminal histories of the people they're hiring. Is probably the best way I can say that. So through two means, expungement and shielding. So expungement of an ex-offender's record so that it literally doesn't exist anymore, and shielding of certain crimes so they're still there, but we can't see them. Only law enforcement and others can see them. The reason they did this is based in very good intentions to try to address some of the social ills. But think about what that does to employers. Having the General Assembly put a blindfold over their eyes, it creates opportunity for liability, right? I didn't know that guy was a criminal. I wouldn't have hired him. Or I want to hire him because the type of business I have is perfect for ex-offenders, and I can help give them a way out. So 2 Democrats in the House put forward this bill to limit the liability of employers who have hired ex-offenders, and it passed unanimously in the House of Delegates last year, and ran out of time for getting a vote in the Senate. So we'll see what happens this year. I hit right to work over the head enough times in this presentation that I don't think we need to talk about it, but other than the fact that it has been put forth as a bill every year for the last maybe 10 years, I don't know. And it never even gets a vote. It gets voted down along party lines in the committee, and doesn't make it to the House floor. That needs to change. I just laid out a lot of data as to why it's a really important thing for a state's economy. So it at least needs a debate. I'm sure a lot of you followed the mandated paid leave bill of a couple years ago, and this was one of the amendments that I don't know why, honestly, it didn't get approved. This is really an Ocean City thing. There's so many employers in Ocean City that employ seasonal help, obviously, the boardwalk, all lifeguards, all kinds of things. And the threshold is set at 106 days in the law. And it needs to be at 120 days of employment, that if you're employed for 120 days, then you're eligible for mandatory paid leave. What's happening is, because it's 106 days, these people can be employed, and then they can take the last 2 weeks off for the summer and get paid for it. They're not stupid. People are not stupid. So all these young kids have figured that out, and they're taking off the last couple of weeks before they go back to college, and they're getting paid for it, and the employers are left holding the bag. So it failed as an amendment to the bill. It was put forth last year as a whole new standalone bill, and it just keeps getting turned away. So I think this tells a big story right here of what's happening in the 2021 session. I started out a few weeks ago thinking that they were going to get in and get out. They were going to take care of the most important things they could take care of, i.e. COVID, lots of different COVID bills, and certainly the Coven situation. Because I don't think they want to be there. Why would they want to be there under these working conditions? But looking at the bills that have been filed so far, this is not a modest legislature. They're as aggressive and activist probably as they were last year. Which was pretty aggressive. And so there are a ton of bills about equity. I'll show you a few of them. First of all, this just came out yesterday that, or 2 days ago, with Governor Hogan's budget, he's looking to cut taxes for retirees, which it's like he read the whole presentation, right? It just makes sense. We need to keep those people and their wealth here rather than going somewhere else. Another big bill that's a real positive is the COVID-19 immunity for employers, and it's not a blanket immunity. It's a very reasonable bill in that it's trying to cut down on frivolous lawsuits. So basically, if a business has done the right thing, if they put the right procedures in place and someone still gets COVID, then they can't be sued for being negligent. Obviously, there will be some employers who are negligent, and they should still be liable. But the vast majority of employers are doing the right thing, and there definitely needs to be an immunity bill to help with that. Still looking at the time. I'm not going to talk really about the peace orders right now, but I want to call your attention to these three outlets. First of all, any vertical organizations that you're a part of, please read their emails over the next 80 days. They're going to be telling you about bills, particularly that are affecting your industry, that you need to act on. And so pay attention to that, and then use Vote Jobs Maryland and Roll Call to contact your representatives and tell them how you want them to vote on these different bills. MarylandReporter.com is one of the best sites. It's generally a compilation site. They pull from other places, but they write some original content too. But it's very down the middle. Maryland Matters is one that I like a lot. Josh does a great job. It's a decidedly progressive slant, but it's a great perspective and it's very good. And then the Daily Record as well. BBJ also. But I think the best thing for you to do is go to this website. This is where the General Assembly houses all of, and it's a very good website, actually. It was pretty bad 2 or 3 years ago, and it's a fantastic one now. Every piece of legislation is there. And here's a little hint, so that you don't have to spend too much time on the gobbledygook of the legalese. You can click, when you click on a bill, you can click on the fiscal note, and that's what some of the bean counters within the legislature, within legislative services, they do an analysis, and they give a paragraph, 1 or 2 paragraphs that summarizes what the bill is. If you just read that, you're 99% along the way. Sometimes there's some tricky stuff in the legalese that you have to look at. But so you go to mgaleg.maryland.gov, click on your bill. There's a good search function. You could search by keyword and know what's going on. Again, back to your industry in particular, combined reporting is back for like the 12th year. They keep bringing it up, even though studies show that it's not a net financial gain to the state. And the throwback rule, a lot of you are probably aware of, that was in last year, that's back. A really kind of big and ugly bill is this carbon tax that they're going to use to help pay for Kerwin. And this, if you look at that last part, prohibits them from passing the taxes along to ratepayers. So there's constitutionality issues with this. This is going to be something to watch. You can see by the bill numbers, HB 33 and HB 76, it's a bill that they put in pretty early in the process that kind of gives you a hint that it's maybe a priority. But the biggest thing is there's a lot of tax bills coming. One of them in particular that we need to talk about here with this group especially, and I hope all of you go back, we're going to send out this, and Denise, I think, don't send the version I sent you earlier. I may have made a tweak or two. I'll send you out a new version that you can send to everybody. But definitely go check out HB 215. That's a big tax on the investment services field. And so imagine for a moment on the heels of COVID, when everyone has learned to work remotely, if an investment advisor is licensed in Florida or North Carolina, and they can fly up here once a week or once a month to meet with clients to avoid a 17% tax on their services, don't you think they're going to do that? It's just like the millionaires tax a few years ago when they enacted that, and all the millionaires fled, and they had to promptly undo the millionaires tax the next year. If you're interested, immediately at the end of this talk today at 1:30, the House has their hearing on this bill, and it's definitely something that financial people should be aware of. A couple of other little things about diversity on boards and so forth, and a mandate to give that all employers must give 2 hours of paid time off to vote. Just things that are poking their nose in between the employer and employee. Little concluding slide. First of all, I just want to comment that I looked at a minute ago here at the chat, and I see that Jay Steinmetz commented, "Vote Jobs Maryland." Jay and his company, Jay does a lot of things. Has a great company called Barcoding Inc. In Baltimore City, and he built the app. And so just thank you for that, Jay.
You're welcome.
So my pitch, please join Maryland Free, at least consider it. Go check out our website, see what we're all about. We need there's strength in numbers. Definitely download the Vote Jobs Maryland app. It's pretty powerful. It's got a lot of content at your fingertips. And roll call is a powerful tool. It's completely objective. The only thing maybe a little subjective is how we decide which votes to include, but we give a full paragraph on why we included it. So if someone doesn't like their score, there's two things they can do. They can argue with us about whether we should have included the bill or not, but they can't argue how they voted. That's their vote. We don't do anything. We just report their vote. But the second thing they could do is just think about the consequences of their votes. The fourth bullet there, educate your employees, such a thorny issue, gets everybody worked up. I have data done by a national group out of DC that does a survey every year. And their data clearly shows that employees do want to hear from their bosses, not how to vote, but how bills, legislation, politics affects their jobs. So you can do that very middle of the road without giving a lot of opinion. This issue we talked about with minimum, without question, minimum wage increases do benefit some people. Without question, minimum wage increases do hurt some people. So talking about that in an open way and just laying out facts and giving people links to nonpartisan resources, I promise you people want to hear that, but we're all freaked out, even me, about how to talk to our employees about these things. And then finally, support the PAC. That's where we make a difference. So I know we got some of our questions out. We still have 6 minutes if anybody has anything else. And here's my contact info. I do have a Maryland free email address, but it's just so much easier if I use my my work. So thank you. Happy to have any other questions if we have them.
Well, if no one, excuse me, if no one has any questions, Dwayne, I just want to thank you. That was fantastic. Really a lot of things that I think most of us don't think about on a day-to-day basis. Certainly we'll be following some of that 2021 legislation, specifically around that retirement. I think that was really interesting. So just want to thank you again for this information today. On behalf of FEI, we would like to make a contribution or donation to Maryland Free. So we'll be in touch with you to help support the work that you're doing to bring awareness to these items that affect all of us in some way, shape, or form as Marylanders. So again, thank you. Thanks everyone for joining today, and we hope to see you at our February event.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kim. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Don't
you.
hesitate to reach out.